It's Sonia, live in L.A., today with guest host Steve Allen.
Howdy, and welcome to our Tuesday show. We're coming to you live. Wouldn't it be funny if I dropped dead after saying that? Anyway, I'm Mary Steenburgen, and I'm sitting in for Sonia Live. Sonia's off today. She's out with her husband, Mr. Live, I believe. One wonderful family, the Lives. Anyway, this hour, we're going to be talking about some fascinating things, why the demand for medical technology may be greater than we can affordably supply. Also, one of my dear friends and favorite funny people, playwright Larry Gelbart. He has a hit show in New York called The City of Angels. He's also going to do one in L.A. called How Are You? And we'll chat with one of my favorite authors of all time, L.A. Times columnist Al Martinez. Over the past couple of years, though, to get down to our first chat, we've heard a great deal about cults. It's been going on now for some time, religious and even satanic cults. I've never quite understood what a satanic cult is. There's a sense in which I understand it, but part of it still eludes me. Our guest will probably enlighten me on that. We're talking again about cults and the devastation they brought to thousands of American families, including my own. Steve Hassan became what we call a Mooney, member of the Unification Church, at age 19, following a serious car accident. There's something important about that. We can get to it later. 2 years later, he was deprogrammed, fortunately, at his parents' request by several former members of that particular cult. And he's the author of an important book. Really try to get it. It's called Combating Cult Mind Control. You don't go to Midas Muffler or your neighborhood grocery store. You go to bookstores to look for these things called books. Again, Combating Mind Control. Hi, Steve.
How are you, Steve Allen?
Fine, thank you. We have this peculiar equipment here where I hear you, and then half a second later I see your mouth move. So watch my mouth at all times.
Right.
You and I have communicated before when I was doing a book myself on this subject a few years ago called Beloved Son. And right. I thank you for your information at that time. Now, you're obviously, I don't want to embarrass you, you're obviously a superior young fellow. You're very bright. No dummies can write books. And you have distinguished yourself in a number of ways. I stress that here by way of introducing the fact that most people, when they think of Moonies, think of kind of like, hey, babe, dopo, sandals and long-haired types who are lying on the beach staring at the palm trees anyway and don't have too much happening up here. That's obviously not the case with many of those who have been brought in. So tell us about your experience. How did you, bright and superior as you are, get drawn into the Moonies?
Well, I would just say that the majority of the people that I've met, Steve, in the last 14 years are very bright, talented, idealistic people.
Sure. And
they're not emotionally disturbed druggies. And in fact, the majority of people in cults today have three-piece suits on and not robes and shaved heads. Myself, I was a student at Queens College in New York City. I had broken up with my girlfriend, and that's also something that's relevant in that many people get sucked into mind control cults when they're off balance or during a period of stress in their life, divorce or change of job or change of location. And I asked if this was a religious organization, and they looked me in the face and said, oh, no, not at all.
Really?
And that's a very important theme to keep in mind because people are not joining cults, in my experience. They're getting recruited by cults that are using deceptive techniques and mind control techniques. And
I was going to say, the simple lie is a very common method of communication, either one-to-one or with the public, of many of these groups, and probably all of them.
Right, and we're not just talking about religious groups, we're talking about political cults, commercial cults, psychotherapy cults, any group that has a pyramid structure with someone at the top who has absolute authority, where there's deceptive recruiting and mind control techniques like phobia indoctrination, thought stopping, information control, where people are made to be dependent on the group identity and the group sources of information.
Now, this phenomenon I learned as I said earlier, doing my own book, is quite ancient, and it always seems to be associated with times of great social unrest, as well as you mentioned, personal turmoil. The individual is in trouble, his world, his society is in trouble. And we certainly are in a troubled world today. So I would assume that is one of the reasons we're still seeing this great explosive growth of the cults. Do you agree?
Yes, but I would say that the groups today are much more sophisticated than they were even 10 years ago, much less 100 years ago or 500 years ago. And through use of modern technology, through marketing, through PR agencies, they're able to attract very bright, talented people, well-established positions of influence in society, and capitalize on that celebrity or on that position of influence to bring in other people. And always it's a matter of the group playing God, telling the members underneath what they think they're ready to know. So rather than looking at human beings with respect and at adults as if they can, in fact, exercise free will, these groups adopt the kind of ends justify the means mentality and justify all kinds of manipulative experiences for people, including hypnotic induction and behavior modification techniques and a programming of a new identity, again, where the person is made to feel like they're under control and making their own decisions, but in fact their mind is in a very narrow funnel, and all they can do is think positive thoughts and compliant thoughts to the top leadership. But fortunately, I found that the human spirit wants to be free, and people want to know the truth ultimately. And that's why there's an alternative for loved ones, family members, and friends to communicate with people in mind control situations and begin to unlock the mind control techniques. And that's a great portion of my book.
Good for you. My son Brian was in such a group in the Seattle area for 11 years, and after he, thank goodness, got out of that and looked back at it, he said, I realize now I have wasted 11 years of my life. That's a pretty big chunk of time to waste. We're going to be taking phone calls, Steve, as you know, from some of our viewers, and we'll be continuing our discussion with Steve, and as I say, take your calls. The number here is 213-469-5533. We'll be right back with Steve Hassan. We're talking with cult expert Steve Hassan, former Mooney, as they're called, and author of a fine book called Combating Cult Mind Control. Steve, one question I'd like to put to you before we take a call from someone in New York named Brian. You have reported that the cults today are somewhat different. You mentioned they're using modern methods. Are these methods enabling them to bring in people that they might not have been able to recruit 15 years ago?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. For example, there are different personality models that have been developed in psychology for understanding how people think and how they interact with the world. And by a cult group taking this personality model and honing their own recruitment techniques to fit a specific individual, they're going to be that much more successful with that individual. And there are dozens of other techniques like that.
All right, thank you. It's doing injustice to your book to try to explain it all in just these few minutes, so please, folks, grab a copy. Now, Brian from New York, you're on.
I was just concerned that maybe a lot of exotic religions were getting painted with the same brush. I wouldn't want to see a fear of cults used to, say, prevent the introduction of Hinduism or Buddhism in the U.S. or...
Yeah, I agree, and the point here is not to label with a tar brush groups that are different. The point is to look at the behaviors of a particular organization and be careful of fraud. And so one of the things, and I've gotten letters from hundreds of people who've read the book who were involved with unorthodox religious and other types of groups that said, thank you for writing this book because it spells out the behavioral criteria of a destructive cult, so I can share it with my loved ones and show that I am exercising my own free will.
One of the things I've noticed, Steve, in the cults that are clearly on the bad side of the ledger is when you come in, sell your car, give us all the money you have in the world, give us all the money you're going to leave your children, if any, and give it to Mr. Big. Do you find that as a common theme?
Yes, although they never say it like that. It's you're always led step by step down the garden path, and only when you're under the control of the organization may one of the sub-leaders say, you know, I had a dream, and God said to tell you that it was time to really commit your life to our organization to help save the world. And so there's an illusion of choice there, but nevertheless, lives have been devastated. Children who were brought up in cults are devastated, many times with medical neglect as well as child abuse. And the best thing is preventive education, becoming a good consumer, thinking critically, asking a lot of questions. And the more a group says, I have the truth, know that you have to check out critical information about that organization.
Yeah. There's 1,000 people saying, I've got the truth. They can't all be right. Kim from New Jersey, you're on.
Hi, I have a question. What would you do about someone like me who got involved with, can I say the name of the cult?
Sure.
Right by me.
Got involved with the Children of God at 15, got fully indoctrinated. It was planned that I was going to be shipped off to what they call a colony in a foreign country until I was 18, so my parents couldn't find me. I remember stepping off the back porch, telling my parents I was going shopping, and then I've been blank. It's like I have no memory of an entire year.
Wow.
Well, the Children of God, renamed the Family of Love, basically left the United States when the Attorney General of New York had charges for child molestation against David Berg. Now I hear they're being sent back with their families to the United States to begin recruiting again here. It's a group that uses sexual seduction to recruit. It's a group that uses sexual abuse of children and incest.
They're one of the worst groups of all in my view, Steve.
They rank up very, very high in terms of the devastation on the individuals and the families. And what I would recommend is there's two organizations, the Cult Awareness Network, which is a grassroots organization based in Chicago, Illinois, that you can connect up with, and a support group for former members called Focus. And the best thing for you would be to meet with other former members of the Children of God and other cults and help to process through those blank years. I'm sure it's been your own unconscious mind desire to shut out all the horrible things that you were exposed to, but nevertheless can recover from.
Thank you. Good advice. We have now from Florida, Arthur on the line.
Yes, sir. I have a sister that was taken in by a cult called the Scientology, Scientologist.
Yes.
Right.
And I remember when, this has been some time ago, but isn't it Mr. Hubbard that's the head of it, the one that has this...
L. Ron Hubbard.
L. Ron Hubbard with the book that's advertised on television.
Dianetics.
Right. Is that a part of his cult?
Exactly. And even though L. Ron Hubbard died a few years ago, now the group is bigger than it's ever been before. Even though 500 top leaders were kicked out, they're starting subgroups like Scientology using the same mind control techniques. So instead of one cult, now there's about 31 cults that are using the same mind control technology to hurt people, in my opinion.
As you know, Steve, the 60-minute television show has done twice, that I know of anyway, exposés of Scientology. They're absolutely shocking as regards the methods that group resorts to.
Absolutely, and they use their money and clout and the celebrities that they've recruited to harass former members and critics such as myself. And yet the book Dianetics is in every bookstore and is advertised profusely, sucking in unaware people.
Sure. Well, Steve, again, I strongly recommend your book, Combating Mind Control. This would require a 4-hour discussion to even scratch the surface. It's a major problem. It's not just something that affects a few people, and we thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Steve, for having me.